trust the process. Put together a plan for yourself. Let's look at your drop. Let's video what you're doing and make sure that we're getting it right. And then just do the thing and you're going to get better.
They call me the Iceman.
I tried to make the world shrink to about a 3-yard by 3-yard little spot. I couldn't even really see the front line in front of me. It was my holder and me and my few little steps.
For you guys that may know Brett but don't know, I mean, the guy knows what he's talking about.
Man, y'all order my dog's book, man. The Kicker's Bible.
Roll another one 'cause I'm winning in my photo.
Welcome to the Iceman Podcast, where we share the extraordinary journeys of coaches, players, and personnel, offering a genuine look to the ups and downs of the hero's journey in the sports world. We're glad you're here to join us for the tales of triumphs and pursuit of success in the sporting life. And I'm your host, as always, Barry Kelly. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by this guest, Dawson Zimmerman of Lawrenceville, Georgia. Okay, he's the national director of punting at one-on-one kicking at Brookwood High School. He was a 3-time regional champion and made a state championship appearance. Was a all-state punter by the Georgia Sports Writers, and had a playing career at Clemson, where he was a 4-year starter as a punter, averaging 42 yards a punt his senior year, and he achieved an all-honorable ACC performance. He was also a finalist for the Lowe's Senior Class Award and the Whirlpool Trophy Award, and has worked with such specialists as A.J. Cole, Blake Gilligan, and Jake Marta. One of the most respected specialist coaches, and I'm fired up to have another coach like this that can talk ball and talk specialists, play with me. Dawson, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here, man. So excited.
Awesome. Fired up. Well, hey, how about we just jump right into it? We don't waste time. And I like nowadays the content of kind of getting into, the nitty gritty and the fun stuff. Do you mind if we do a new section presented by the Kicker's Bible?
Oh, yeah, you go for it.
So this is called the heavy hitters section. All right, Dawson, a question that everyone is dying to know. Okay. I find this very interesting as far as you get to work with high school, college, and NFL guys. When guys are trying to make that transition from the high school to the college level specialist, what is one fundamental you think they need to hammer? And you can talk about for punters or for kickers or all specialists in general. But in your eyes, what stands out as the one thing that these specialists trying to make that jump from high school and college, or high school to college, need to hammer?
Yeah, that's a great first question. It's a heavy hitting first question. I think that high school to college, it sounds weird, but I actually think if you're a good high school punter, is it easier to get to? I don't know. It's a big jump regardless from level to level. I think that maybe some people might think that college to NFL is a smaller gap because, hey, you've been doing it for so long in front of huge crowds of people. It's a big jump too. And so I think, I'll start with high school to college. Fundamentals wise, I think that there is your worst punt in high school, you get away with. If you punt a good spiral in high school, your coach thinks you're like a god, right? Like, you're watching on the sideline and your punter, hits 150 yards. It is like the heavens open up. And, whether the guy catches it, it's going over his head, the return man, ball's rolling down the field, whatever. And then in college, suddenly you're being held to such a higher standard in terms of get off time, in terms of what your bad ball looks like. And then, kind of to go to NFL too, it just takes it to a completely different level of what is your worst ball. So I think in terms of fundamentals, I think it's a matter of what are the things that eliminate your worst punt. And the worst punt, I think, for any punter, everyone hates the shank. But the shank doesn't happen like that often, like one that just goes off straight, like east off your foot or, like out of bounds. It's really just like this hook ball, nose up, middle of the field, if you remember like Matt Dodge not to like, Matt Dodge, like wherever he is, I'm sure that I don't know, he probably hates hearing this, but it's the one he hit to like Deshaun Jackson. It's like just straight down the middle. He's aiming right. It just goes straight down the field, no hang time. Like that's the one that's just devastating. So fundamentally, you're trying to eliminate those type of mishits. And my biggest thing is related to keeping the nose of the ball, especially in terms of a nose down drop versus nose up drop. I think the worst punts that guys have that are just the killers is overstriding with a nose up ball. It's hard to get worse than that in terms of an outcome. And so fundamentally, I think a lot of the technique that I work on with guys is just trying to raise the level of those terrible balls and optimizing it to how can I have mishits where I'm the only person in the stadium who knows that it was bad or that it was a mishit. And so I think, the aim gets smaller as you get to NFL, but I think that's the big thing is avoiding that just devastating ball, overstride nose up, and then just making the misses smaller as you get to the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually to add some notes from our team here, and it was talking about, and I watched the tweet too. You had Marshall Nichols, who is friggin' elite punter, man. I know he's from down there, and we played him this year, and he plays for one of my ex-coordinators, Coach Shivas, and man, he had a hell of a year. I think he was top 5 or whatever in the nation in punt average. And you were talking about that, right? Like not overstriding, and talk a little bit about the nose too, because not a lot of people, you really hammer the hips, which we'll get into as this episode goes on, but talk a little bit about that tight chest, right? And the tight upper body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dude, first of all, I love that we're getting as specific about technique because again, like I was saying, like just before this, I could talk about this just forever. And I almost want to like go find a football center and demonstrate some stuff. I might have to like find one. But when it comes to the nose of the ball, there's a lot of reasons why a ball would go nose up, why it would go nose down, why it would turn too far in. And none of those reasons happen at the release of the drop. And this is, I think, such an important principle for anyone who's learning kicking, punting, whatever, is that it is an entire chain, it's an entire sequence of events. So you might have a problem cutting the ball because your ball's turning in the air, kind of turning too far in. You have a problem with it just veering nose up. Like that could be something that's happening like 5 steps before the actual like release of the ball. So I think so much of it relates to the setup and like the first, how we start that chain of movement is just crucial because it's just the plane's, headed out and it's going to go where it's going to go. And so, yeah, so I think that's kind of the big thing is for me is I'm so focused on how guys catch the ball, how they mold it, and take that first step with their momentum. Because after that, and any punter kind of knows this, especially in a game, you kind of just black out. Like as soon as you catch the ball and take that first step, you are like, all right, suddenly the ball's gone. And that, so you kind of have to develop that muscle memory to get to that, good first position and then let momentum take over.
Yeah. I love what you said there. The 5 steps before that, right, is really too many people, coaches also, especially at this level or whatever the next level, they treat the effect, right? That's what they're doing by talking about where the ball's tilted and all that stuff. Oh, the ball's tilted too far up. They're not treating the cause. And that's one of the things I've had to kind of get back to and really work on is, treating the cause and not the effect there. So I think you hit on that really well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's a matter of like hunting down what is that exact cause, and that's where it's just like a big puzzle. I love some of the happiest that I get is when I have players who will send me their film and I can't figure out why this is happening. I'm like, yes, this is my puzzle for like the next, 20 minutes to figure out or to kind of provide them some sort of answer. So yeah, it's a big kind of, you're chasing what's that cause, and it's super fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Well said. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about your background here. Okay. You work with one-on-one kicking camps, which is one of the top camps in the country. You guys specialize in year-round summer pro training, right, with your specialist, and you're based out of Atlanta. It has been said, Dawson, that the best punters in the country train in Atlanta. Is there any truth to that?
I mean, it's a lot of luck. The guys who just happen to have been here. And I can't mention one-on-one kicking without talking about like Mike McCabe, who trained me, who's in Birmingham, and who also kind of helps me run the Atlanta stuff. How instrumental he's been at bringing so much this talent to this kind of like southern, kind of Birmingham, Atlanta kind of footprint. I think the number of guys that we've had out of Atlanta, out of our division, I would love to take credit, like 100% credit for all their success, and to say, oh, they'd be nothing without. But in some ways, guys like, I'll take a guy like Blake Gilligan, who's at Westminster, went to high school there. It's probably 30 minutes away from where we train. And I mean, he came, and it was just like, I wasn't sure if I had seen somebody with a faster leg in high school. And it was a matter for him of being like, hey, do this, this, this. This is how you need to drop the ball. This is how you need to step. And it was like, boom, got it. I mean, it wasn't even he could have watched a YouTube video and gotten to where he got in terms of college. Now, to get to the NFL level, there was some like additional refinement and training, and that's just the case for anybody. But Blake, AJ Cole, just super talented. Jake Camarda, Rodrigo Blankenship, we worked with for a long time. And so it was really just kind of like a great run of just having really talented specialists. And so I think that when you combine really good specialists together, we had all those guys on the same field when they were in high school. Just the level of their own even expectation, just where that bar is for them, just became really high. And so I think we've just kind of taken that momentum and just kind of run with it over the years of the number of guys we've kind of been able to coach, and have been fortunate and privileged enough to teach some of the stuff that we've continued to learn from some of these pro guys too. And even, I mean, even developing as a coach, the more punting I watch, the better I get at coaching it. And so yeah, it's just been like a really great sequence of punters and a great experience. But I think really highly of what we do technically. But those guys have always been so bought in, and those are it's like they marry the talent with the work ethic. And so yeah, I'm like so appreciative of those guys for just who they are and kind of how they've added to the Atlanta legacy, I guess. So
yeah. Brace yourselves for The Kicker's Bible. The Kicker's Bible, a specialist how-to manual born from a decade of dedication to specialists and special teams. This ain't your average football book. It's the holy grail of gridiron guidance. Dive into the wisdom of over 20 NFL specialists, including Eagles Hall of Famer David Akers and 15-year NFL vet and kicking guru Shane Graham, as they answer your burning questions to become the best specialist that you can possibly be. Whether you're a peewee rookie or an NFL veteran, this book is your secret weapon to kicking success. It's out now. Go to www.icemankicking.com/books or our Twitter bio at Iceman Coaching or Amazon and search The Kicker's Bible to get your copy today. Now kick your feet up and let's get back to one cold episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe. And they come back, they give back, and
yeah.
That I think that culture is pretty infectious. I was gonna say the best punters are from Atlanta. How'd you get them there from California? But I can't even front all those guys having all that success, man. I think that's pretty cool. Talk a little bit about your career, okay?
Yeah.
We won't dive super far into it, but you got to play under Dabo Sweeney. What was it like? What did you learn from playing under Coach Sweeney?
Dude, well, what's funny is the one of the most notable events of Dabo's first season occurred in terms of it involved me. And so he was an interim coach. So he came after Coach Tommy Bowden was resigned. And so one of the big things that he had talked about all week leading up to his first game was running off the field. And so he just made a big emphasis of it. And so the first game, you know, I get in, I'm a freshman, I shank a punt. We put in the senior, he shanks one. I go back in, I shank it again. This is like the story of any like punter's freshman year. But so but after I punt it, I mean the ball goes straight out of bounds. So the play's over. So I'm walking off the field. And so Dabo just runs out, meets me like almost on the numbers, and is like, you know, yelling at me like, you go back on that field and you run back. So the play's dead. Like, I mean, no one's on the field. And I run all the way back, like across the hash to where I punted and then sprint off. And, you know, the crowd's just like eating it up and they're just loving it. And, you know, made it on like the ESPN Sports Center highlight of like how Dabo's changing the culture at Clemson and all this kind of stuff. So we're very intertwined in that sense of like, you know, one of his first things. But, you know, Dabo's he's a great coach. I mean, I think that a lot of times people they question how once you're at the top, it's really easy for people to take shots at you. And I think that over the years, there's been people who have just extolled Dabo's brilliance and personality and things. And then there's been this movement towards kind of like vilifying it, and everyone kind of like, you know, thinks it's all baloney. So I think he's one of the most authentic people I've ever met, one of the most personable. And so while like any coach, you get chewed out, you get coached really hard. I think that Dabo was a great coach and model. And I think out of all the coaches in college football, you know, he's got to be up there with one of the most real, one of the most player centered. And so I just think the world of him. And yeah, so it was a great run at Clemson. Had a great time with the team and all that jazz. Wouldn't change a thing.
And you learned how to sprint off the field.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to as a punter. It's like the last thing I'm thinking about after I mishit a punt is I'm gonna sprint my butt onto the sidelines. Like that, you're just swimming in your own thoughts. Like, how does this happen? You know, what the hell? Like, don't have bad body language, but
yeah.
like you're fighting all those demons.
I'm just trotting off, you know, thinking about how I'm gonna get benched again. Suddenly I'm just facing the fire of God.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll sprint out there, sure, man.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's cool though. That obviously he's had such success for such a long time. Like that relatability and that accountability that he's had. And like you said, you're gonna always have naysayers at the top, but to be who he is through all that is a true tale of, you know, why he's successful. You are a teacher, and that's one of the things that I relate to is that I know that the best coaches are teachers, and a lot of coaches nowadays, they don't get that experience because a lot of them say that at the college level, they just hop it right in after they're done playing. And I've personally seen it, and I'm not knocking coaches that don't teach, but I know that I would not be the coach I am today if I did not get in the classroom, learn effective classroom teaching techniques, such as spacing, such as using different ways to reach kids. So, you know, tell me a little bit about how your teaching has helped you as a coach.
Yeah, I mean it's been so important. You know, it's funny, like for a long time, a lot of times coaches get into teaching in order to coach. But the funny thing that I don't think a lot of people know about me is that has not been the history of, I've just kind of, what people have seen on social media is me coaching all these guys and blah, blah. But like most of the hours spent a day is like teaching literature, right? I mean, like, it's like, that was my world and still is in this like split kind of like, Bruce Wayne, like Batman switch of like by
You're pretty
day,
much Bruce
like I'm
Wayne at
like
this point.
teaching. Yeah, but whoever I am, it's whatever. But yeah, it's like that's teaching and being in the classroom and teaching writing. So I was an English major, creative writing minor at Clemson. And so the same idea of kind of like coaching someone in their writing or in their thinking and kind of encouraging them to kind of like chunk this up right into like manageable, understandable steps and really valuing the clarity of that explanation. Like that's, of course, that's what teaching or that's what coaching is, because you have such a limited time. If you were to tell a kid, if you're out there on the field, if you come at him with a fire hose of technique goals in the span of 30 minutes, and then that kid walks off the field and doesn't exactly know what to work on and know how this is going to be kind of contextualized from, well, first I need to work on this, then I need to work on this, then I need to, like, if he doesn't have that kind of like schema, like you've not really done your job as a coach.
And
You've
he's
kind
going
of
to
just
drown in
impressed.
information.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just trying to impress them with your knowledge. And I think that unfortunately that's just kind of sometimes, I mean, I think we all kind of do that at some point, but I think trying to catch ourselves to say, can I not tell him everything that's wrong with his form? Like, can I not, drop 50 different things and just help him where he's at step by step so that over the course of a year, over the course of however long you have with that athlete, they not only get better at punting or kicking, but they can start to coach themselves. Is I think one of the things that I prioritize a lot is what are you going to do when you're on a field by yourself and there is no coach? Like you have to have that sort of trust of the process and have an understanding of what that process is. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I think about things in terms of teaching and coaching.
Yeah, yeah. Just like you said, having that schema, having that organized list where you're not just spewing information at them and they're drowning in it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think any coach could, like any coach could just say, you need to fix this, 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 this. And that's not really like helpful though. It's not helpful.
Mm-mm. Okay, so then when you're crafting, and I like that, you're almost like the Batman of specialist coaches, man. You got this job during the day and then this job at night.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so when you're talking about, let's talk about practice schedules, because a lot of guys struggle, right? They could be out there as a specialist, as a punter, say, for 2 or 2.5 hours at a time. They don't have someone like you or me that's giving them a schedule. I've got an idea of kind of what we do with our guys. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and especially working with these, NFL guys. How do you occupy that 2.5 hours? How do you sculpt that practice schedule? Do you have a general format? Of course, you're not going to be kicking for 2.5 hours. Your leg will literally. Actually, that's a great story. When I first started playing football, my junior year of high school, I was, very gung ho and like, I'm going to be the, kicker.
Oh yeah.
I was the
Of
only
course.
specialist out there, right? You've
Right.
had it before. So Coach Vogt, in all of his wisdoms, an old coach, our head coach, and he goes, "Hey, Arkelian, make sure you don't kick your leg off." And I was like, "Yeah, right. I can't do that." And I kicked, I swear, Dawson, all practice. And after a week of that, I was like, oh my God, I went to soccer practice after, and my leg felt dead. I mean, heavy, numb. And you know what I did in all my infinite wisdom at that age? I just kept pulling on my quad. I'm like, if
Oh
I can
yeah. You stretch it.
stretch it,
Yeah. Let me just keep stretching it until the pain goes away.
if
I
I
know.
stretch it
That's
maybe
so
a
funny.
little bit harder. Yeah. So
That's great.
eventually I walked in the training room and I'm like, I can barely walk and I can't play soccer and I definitely can't kick a ball. And they're like, yeah, dude, you pulled your quad within a week of being out there. So
Yeah.
long story short and all that, I ended up playing the first game, made a PAT and absolutely shanked a field goal in my first game. But
Nice. Nice.
how do you prevent that from happening? What do you do? How would you script
Yeah.
this with your guys?
I mean, well, so I think that some of it kind of depends on like what the expectations of the team is. And so it's kind of like you take the structure that your coach wants to give you, right? So if you do special teams at the beginning, then your schedule might look a little bit different than if you do it at the end, or even if you have some like, I really hate this, but I really hate when there's and I used to have this happen to me too. You just roll with it, but it's like, okay, let's have our special teams period first, right? And then, oh, by the way, I want you to, 2.5 hours from now, we're gonna have a final field goal period. And it's like, well, how am I gonna stay warm? Whatever. But
2.5
let's
hours.
assume that, let's assume that it's just kind of my utopia practice schedule. I think that so much of it kind of depends on you're wanting to start with the little kind of first step of that. I'm talking about for punting. You're starting with the hands. So everything starts with like catch and mold, receiving the ball, drilling the first step, working on drops. And so it's kind of the sequence of catch and mold, adding the first step, going into like a one-step drop, doing one-step liners, ticking up the trajectory, then kind of working to full step liners directional, then do full step punt. So it's like you're maximizing. You can get 30 reps of a one-step punt and make more progress technique-wise than you would if you were to do the same number of full steps, because you have to get that not just feeling, but you have to start to understand what your cues are and how your body, what your tendencies are. And so I think that without those small checkpoints along the way of working through the mold, working through the steps, it's too much in your head if you were trying to just fix it in a full step. And that's a lot of times what I tell guys is like, the process is we're going to get insanely technical with our drill work. I mean, I'm very, very particular about how things need to like work so that they don't have to think about any of it while they're actually punting. And I think it's going from that progression that's super important. You start to where you are just maniacal about setup in their first step, and then you just turn it off. Once you feel like that's kind of ingrained, then your body's just in that position and you just go from it.
A little bit.
So I think that's kind of
there on that.
Yeah.
On your kind of, I guess we would call it the warm up or our dry run sequence, which could be 4 periods. If each period is about 5 minutes long,
Sure.
what do you make your guys do as far as how many drops? Because this is a good question that I feel like a lot of guys miss on. You're doing a lot of different variations of it. How many do you think you do in a day?
In a given day, I think that if you're going to aim for close to, let's say, an hour and a half, because it's hard to fill the 2.5 hours. At some point, it's like, you guys are finished. You drink some water, stretch, shoot the breeze, whatever. But I think that if you're aiming for an hour and a half concentrated work, I would say probably you're going to end up doing 25 catch and molds. Then you do 25 catch and molds to the right, you do 25 to the left, and then you do 10 high, 10 low. I mean, that's going to take you 15 minutes. And then you start getting into the drop. And I would say probably you're going to do, depends how fast you go, but I would say anywhere between a minimum of like 40 one-step drops, where it's just like again from the same position. And then and so that's going to probably take you at least 15 20 more minutes. So you're kind of like 30 to 40 minutes in, and you haven't actually kicked a ball, right? Like, and I think that it's kind of this almost like driving range mentality sometimes I think the kickers have, where it's like, have you ever been to the driving range and you roll up into the parking space, and this is like me, I'm like just itching, like get the ball down, like give me the bag of balls, throw it down, let me just start. And I think that the
Hacking
tendency
away.
just hacking away, right? Let me just put it down there and just see how it's going to go. But it's like, if if you go in with a plan, if you go in with a sense of, hey, I'm not going to rush this. I know what I need to do. I know what my routine is going to yield results. Then those, and you go with a purpose, then your initial periods, you start to value them. I mean, it's the same way anyone builds a routine. Same way anyone does anything small, is they start to value this process where it's like, seems slow, but I know it's benefiting me. And you feel a lot better at the end of your practice if you stuck to your plan. And I've been there. You mentioned like trying to kick your leg off. I mean, my coach would be like, stop. This is in college. Like Coach Danny Pearman would be like, stop punting. And I'd be like, Coach, I just can't. Like I see a ball in the field, I'm going to punt it. Tell them to get the ball away from me. I'm like an addict. Like get it away.
You're an addict. You're addicted to punting.
Yeah, I'm addicted to punting.
There's worse things to be addicted to.
There certainly are. It's pretty healthy in the long run. But it's like at the end of that practice, you're frustrated, right? You're like, couldn't figure it out today. I don't necessarily know, because you're judging everything by the outcome of your punts. You're judging everything based off of the outcome of what you've seen rather than the process that you stuck to. And I think it's great for like the mental well-being of punters and kickers to say, like, it's a class like Nick Saban kind of stereotype, like trust the process. But it really is. It's like if you have a process at practice and you trust that you've been with a coach or you have an understanding of kicking or punting, and that process is going to help you get better, then you can kind of put blinders on towards whether you ended with a good ball. Like, was this a good enough ending? Have I figured it out for today? And just say, no, I put in a great day of work. I got better today. And I think that that's the main thing that I think a lot of our college guys, they'll communicate with him, because they're in that place where they're just a little bit more frustrated, or the stakes are higher and they want to get that to that next level. It's like, trust the process. Put together a plan for yourself. Let's look at your drop. Let's video what you're doing and make sure that we're getting it right. And then just do the thing and you're going to get better.
Yeah. Wow. That's well said. Like you said, trust the process. I mean, and kind of what you talked about, the stakes too, it does make sense why guys can get so locked in and so frustrated. It's like, I have to be good at this. It's not your livelihood at that point, but damn near close, especially nowadays with, how college football has turned into the pros.
It's a whole different ball game. You're not given the same opportunities or the same runway to develop now. I was signed with a scholarship as a freshman, and then was kind of sure that they weren't going to bring a guy in for like 3 years because I was like just good enough. And I struggled my freshman sophomore year, but now it's like, well, you better figure it out in your freshman year. Otherwise there's transfer portal All-American coming right to your school. And so I think that there's that there is that increased pressure kind of across the board with this carousel of transfers and, with the portal.
No question. I mean, it's even, at some schools I've been at, it's like, okay, at least at the bigger schools, you could carry, 3 specialists because they have the ability. And I've been at smaller schools too. And it's like, hey, we can only carry 2 at each position. So just as you said, there's no time to develop a guy. I mean, they do their developing at lower levels now and they get snatched up by the higher levels. So that is tough for those guys in the development. But I do love what you said about, having, it may take 100 reps or 15 to 20 minutes before you even punt a ball. That's so, just like you said, the driving range mentality of like, I need to go out there. I'm just start swinging. I tell our guys like, hey, you are a pitcher. All right. And you are on a pitch count, no matter what, yes, you can probably punt more than you can kick, but eventually you're going to use all those reps up for the day and then you're done. You can't do anything else. So let's not waste any reps we have. Let's start taking good reps by doing our drops, by doing our, one step line drives or punt darts or whatever you want to call them. So we're, building good habits, just like you're talking about. Talk a little bit too about the everyone's got their own name, but punt darts or line drives.
Yeah. So like a line drive 1 step.
what do you look for in that? Because I know I've seen some guys just freaking they hit line drives
Like
and they
zip
can't
them.
stop hitting line drives. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, the like one step line drive, um, it's going to be a pure one step. So you're not going to add like a jab because it's not about power. It's about weight transfer. So the idea is that you get into a good setup position, and then your drop table is lower and the ball is a little bit nose down because you're just trying to remove the variables of anything that could happen with your drop. And so then what I have my guys focus on in this one step is moving this particular like way of moving their momentum kind of through the ball that they're trying to capture, continue down the field. But the one step drill for me, the line drives, is actually more about alignment. Because I have so many guys that I work with that when they have the ball, everything's oriented to the right. And so they just kind of get into this like pattern of pushing it out. And if that's your case in a one step, like that's so hard because you don't have time to adjust to it, especially in the line drive. So you can't take that big step, sit underneath it and like, throw your body around it. And so it just helps guys get a lot better directionally because, I'll say this to guys who are struggling with like directional left. It's like how many one step line drives do you do directional left? And they'll be like, well, I don't really do that many. It's like, well, that's how you're going to get better at directional left is you train that same path and keep that same alignment. And so you start there and then you gradually just tick up the trajectory of the drop table. So if you're starting out with the line down, you just gradually get to here because a good punter is going to be able, it's like, well, if there's a lot of wind, where are you going to punt it? You're going to be down here, right? And so you're going to, there's some more things you're going to do with your body, but so it's just kind of like being able to hit turnover spirals again and again and again under any kind of like drop table in that one step. And then, guys feel a lot more confident directionally, wind. It just develops their consistency, I think, in a way that's really effective.
Yeah. Yeah. That's key. I like what you said about changing the degrees. That's a good visual representation of that. Okay. So, you go through your kind of warm up to dry run to, you start hitting some balls, start hitting some one steps. And, I'm sure you got, a punt period there. And obviously you're hitting balls now to get ready for that. What about the back half of practice? And what do you do, not just punters, but what do you do with your kickers or snappers? What do you do in the back half after you've hit a good amount of balls? Maybe you got, a few more left in the tank. Where are you at with that?
Yeah. So I think the easiest thing to do is for them to stretch, for them to just kind of take some time to care for their bodies. So I mean, sometimes that might look like if it's the reality sometimes for high school guys is you just haven't had the opportunity within the weight room to do some like simple exercises. Like nothing that's like, I mean, you don't have like, you're not like, I remember Georgia Tech at Clemson, they brought all their weight. I don't know if you saw this, like they brought their weight room equipment out on the field and they were like, pumping and stuff. It's like, you're not trying to put in a lift at practice, but you're just like, if you have some bands, then do some stretch work. If you have, the capacity for, if you feel like you kind of work on like a little bit of speed training, then get a ladder out there, just kind of move around. You've been doing something with one side of your body, swing some with your left. So I think developing a routine that's kind of just like recovery, so that way it's not just like my workout's finished, it's like, well, now it's recovery, and recovery can be very relaxing. I mean, like, who doesn't love recovery when they get to like, oh, today's recovery day, great. I just think that having them just be attuned to, hey, every day at practice, you're going to basically care for your body a little bit, can make a big psychological effect in the long run. Because I've seen, guys just that thought process every day. I'm taking care of my body today. How that relates to them after a weight room session, after a particular hard lift, they're kind of in that same mode. I'm going to take care of my body. So you're just kind of creating these good habits, assuming they don't have to kick at the end of practice. which again I really don't like. I guess if it's just like once a week, um, but I think that's the main thing. Just kind of some structured recovery time is really big.
Yeah, yeah. I liked what you talked about speed training. And then that's the other thing too is, for some of these special teams coaches that don't have a specialist background, they don't know what to do with their guys. I mean, at the very least, that's what you can do is give them a structure. Give them, hey, I've said this a lot of times, but get with your specialist and say, okay, what is a general schedule that you feel comfortable with, or your coach says, your kicking coach, uh, is comfortable with, and then let's sculpt that and then hold you to that standard. Because specialists, if you don't hold them to a standard or hold them to something, they're going to do whatever the heck they want.
Yeah, it's the same as, and it could be a specialist. It could be, you have the quarterbacks there for 45 minutes and you say, all right, you guys are good. Well, I mean, there's plenty of stuff they could be doing, and also I think that there's the psychology of the team just seeing the specialist not doing anything that is often a reality. Like what specialist among us has not done some sort of shenanigans on the field of practice that makes like the other guys be like, what are they doing?
Or in the locker room too, yeah.
Yeah, or in the locker room, right? Like, so, but I mean, if they see, it's like the respect of your teammates, that you're dedicated, and I think that goes a long way for the times that the times you succeed, but also times that you're struggling, that you're in a funk at practice. I mean, guys see you working on it. They're a lot more forgiving as they should be. So,
Yeah.
And then to your point, so, one bit of news I'm pretty excited about is, so I've been asked to speak at the Nike Coach of the Year clinic in Atlanta. So it's a big coaches clinic. Dabo is actually going to be there, which is going to be cool. Hopefully I can kind of touch base with him. But what I'm going to talk about with some of these coaches is like, it blows my mind that a coach could. I know how organized coaches are. I know how oftentimes like everything's scripted, not just practice, but like the whole year is in like a calendar, an Excel sheet. They've been to clinics, they've thought about every aspect of their culture. And then it's like, all right, now you're in the fourth quarter game, into the game of a playoff year. All your hopes and dreams led to this point, and you have a 16-year-old out on the field, and you have no idea what this kid's been doing at practice. Like, blows my mind that could be the reality, but it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, that's just the kicker. He's just been over there. It's like, so to your point, having a plan in place, talking to the kickers, making them or holding them accountable to developing their own schedule that they are responsible for, they can take ownership of, I think is beneficial in so many different ways.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's awesome. And you're dropping some new knowledge here, new updates on the Iceman podcast. So that fired up for you.
Yeah.
That's
Breaking
an
news.
exclusive. Yeah, that's right. Breaking news. It's gonna be all over the internet after this. But okay, cool. That's really, really cool, man. I'm excited for that. But you're right. There's so many details that are measured. And then when it comes to specialists, you're like, well, they just go out and they do their own thing. That is completely unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think that, yeah. Anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Hopefully all the coaches watching the Iceman podcast will now understand that
they're going to have
section.
something.
They need a drill sheet.
That's right. And if they don't, they need to hit up Coach Zimmerman or
yeah.
We'll get them right. So
yeah,
a little bit, this is another really cool thing I saw, Dustin, that you posted was punting with the wind. Right? I know a lot of stuff with kicking with the wind, and this was kind of going to be on my Mythbusters section, but I'm gonna leave that later. But the common coaching point, right, is punting into the wind, drop that ball, just get it freaking low. And I've heard so many different things that I'm a little confused. I thought you did a really good job of explaining it. Can you talk about what you tell your punters when they're punting into the wind?
Yeah. So, and I'll just kind of say, like, so much of my coaching comes from things I couldn't figure out while playing. And I think I said that in this video. It's like, it took me forever. I just didn't, because I was kind of following, I guess, the common assumption. The thing that would logically be the case is you obviously drop your drop table, but I think what everyone does is they feel like because the wind's in your face, you feel vulnerable, you feel exposed if you're all the way stood up. And so all right, guys, they get their body really far forward. And so if your body goes forward, then if this is your body upright and this is your drop table, and you get your body forward, your drop table lowers. And what I want guys to do is lower their drop table without changing their spine angle. Because your weight distribution of your steps, if it's too far forward, you're going to go into an overstride. And that overstride with a low drop, that's, like you're like this, drop table's going down, ball's moving away from you. Now you're in a really, really tough spot of having to sit underneath it, and you don't even get much of your power through it. So your result might come out low, but you're going to be punting at 60% capacity compared to your normal steps. So with my guys, I want them to be upright, relaxed, have their weight under control as they take that first step, but they're just lowering the drop table and then feeling like the ball off their foot, how they're falling through with it. If a normal punt, I'm trying for hang time, is going to be like feeling like it's a 60-degree body kind of finishing up through the ball, then this one's going to be like 45. And they're going to still feel that contact and finishing downfield. It's just going to be with the lower drop table. So it's just kind of, again, as I've kind of like gone back to it, so much for me is just how the weight distribution goes from the beginning of the punt to the end of the punt. Coincidentally, it's something I was really bad at when I was in college. And so again, kind of had to figure it out on the backside. So
that's a good way to say it too. And there's a lot of things I'm like, man, if I had just known this when I was playing, which you can tell yourself that
we're the best punter in the entire world.
Exactly. I love saying, if I slept a little bit more in middle school, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be in the NFL.
100%, man. 100%.
I definitely wouldn't be 5'8", but that's one of my poor eating habits and genetics. But okay, so you would say a little bit, like you said, a little bit of a lower drop table, like at 45 degrees, but keeping that, I guess I call it the hang clean power position, whatever, however you say it with your upper body. Is that how you communicate it?
Yeah. And I think that you're right. Hang clean hips, feel like you're getting your hips to the ball. I think that, one of the difficult things about punting is that you can take any piece of advice too far. So a lot of times if you were to take this as, okay, this is just advice for everyone that applies in all circumstances, and the guy starts getting his shoulders too far forward, he's like, I'm keeping my hips back, I'm going to, hang clean. Then he's going to get too far forward on his front foot. And so it's going to cause a pretty big overstride. And so it's kind of like, AJ Cole's a great example. So AJ like turned the corner when he started feeling, was kind of working with him and started feeling like his weight was far more in his heels and that his body was far more upright. And if you ask AJ, would say like, hey, are your shoulders forward? He'd be like, absolutely not. Then you watch the film and his shoulders are forward. They're like here. But for him, compared to where he was, they aren't. It's a completely different feel. And so I think that that's where you kind of have to have a critical eye towards yourself on film and have an idea of how your technique works. Because everyone's body is also different too. Short punters, faster legs guys, their form might look a little bit, its form's going to look a little different than like a long-legged, J.K. Scott. So, but yeah, so that's kind of like the general thing. Weight distribution, shoulders can be a little relative, but you just got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, there's so many guys, and it's a great point you made about coaching. It's like, okay, this is you need, just like you said, you need to be in that hang clean position. But just like you're saying with AJ, there's differences in people's past techniques and how they feel about it. So you might be telling them something that worked for you, and that's not necessarily true to them. So everyone's can be coached in different ways. I think that's an awesome point you made.
Yeah.
A little bit on that, we got some, I had my guys kind of give me some questions. This is a question from Nick Verdugo. who's a young
Okay.
punter with us, Fresno State,
All right,
and
sweet.
he was watching some of your stuff, and I kind of get all these guys hyped up and involved. He was asking about hip mobility, and you talk a lot about hips and well, for the first thing I'll ask is when you get a low snap, or one of your guys gets a low snap, what's your common process? What's a common error you see with guys restarting their feet, right? Or restarting their steps? And then what do you tell your guys? What's a cue you tell your guys when they're getting low snap? Probably not to overstride, because
Yeah,
I'm sure that's where a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of come from.
Right. I think it's if the big error or the big issue that I see on like a really low snap is obviously your shoulders and your especially if you're wearing a helmet. I mean, your center of gravity is significantly farther forward. Um, and so what happens is guys reach out as they try to when they're coming back up, everything gets a little bit extended. So now their weight's really far and they're extended out. The ball is released and it's kind of a lot of times haphazardly, but it's just kind of it's too far down the field. And so now they have to get into this overstride going backwards to reach it, which is not an optimal position for, having your left foot land and kind of pull the grass and then kind of pull your hips through. You're just kind of like stabbing out and then you're falling back. So I think the main thing for a low snap is going to be reset your feet. So you're going to catch it low, and then how fast can you get to your right foot landing flat on the ground instead of here? Like if this is the toe, because again, if your center of gravity is really far forward, if it's up here, it's pulling you this way. You're going to get on your toe, and that's going to like spring you forward. So catch it low, get flat on that foot, and that kind of gives you less of that forward momentum to be a little bit more, have the weight kind of more centered in your body. And so that way you can still get into a good stride. It's kind of, I think, how I think about it.
That's really good. It's interesting too. I always thought, like for field goal approach and field goal steps, I should be on my toes, like because so that way I can lock my ankle out and already have that
Yeah.
ankle activated. But after talking to David Akers, who helped out and freaking had a lot of success in the NFL, he's like, no, you want to be on the middle of your foot. You want an evenly balanced foot so that
Yes.
when you swing through the ball, you get the momentum going out and not
You
down into
can
the
you
ground.
can you can transfer it. You can
Yep.
transfer it, and there's no up and down and back into the ground.
Yep.
And just really quickly, because this is, I just think, kind of interesting. Again, like my personal journey of like figuring this out a while ago, but overstriding, I think we should think about it less as a matter of distance and more as a matter of weight. So what I mean by that is some guys with their first stride, they'll look at their first stride, they're like, oh, my first stride's long. And they'll shorten it. But if you're still too far forward, you're just making a more powerful spring. So you can take a 7-inch first step, and you're still going to overstride. And you can still be like, I covered three yards, coach. And it's like, no, because this is a matter of how your weight is being propelled down the field. And so versus, you take a guy like, I don't know if you've ever seen any footage of like Andy Lee, back when he was with he punted forever. His first step's massive. I mean, like reaching out, pulling the grass, but it was how his body got there. And that's the thing I kind of love about punting is like, you'll have one kid needs to shorten his stride considerably, and the other kid can make it longer. And so it's just like, it's far more complex. It's simple, but it's like paradoxically way more complex when you think about all these different variables you're kind of juggling.
That's a
So,
really cool way to look at it. I've never thought about it in terms of weight. And I think, I think so. Then for anyone listening, how do you know that someone is evenly weighted or balanced? Is it if you look from the side, you can tell that they're in a, kind of still in that powerful position where their feet are underneath them and they're in an athletic stance, or how do you view that?
yeah, so their right step would be positioned to where it can pull you into your last step, and that last step can pull you through the ball. There's not really any pushing, ideally, in punting. Everything's a pull. But that's not the way that it is for a lot of guys. Like they'll take the step, they'll push into it, they'll push into this thing, and then they'll get this reverse pivot. They push backwards. They're push, push, push. And you want to be pull, pull, through. And so once you kind of start to look at that and you kind of just examine how guys are moving, then especially guys who are hitting like really good balls, then it just kind of like starts to stick out and you can kind of get them into the first position. It's pretty optimal.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think, functional movement has so much to do with good athletes and good specialists. And it wasn't until I got here and worked with Coach Baxter, who's done this a long time. He was a PE teacher. Like that's what really taught me, like, hey, don't look at this as a specialist. Look at this as an athlete. Let's see the most athletic position we can be in,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's a great take, man. I have never heard someone describe it that way. So, and then kind of going into the hips, how are your hips playing? Obviously, you want the transfer of weight, and I don't think that's talked to much. And you can kind of talk. I want to hear you kind of talk about that as far as field goals too. What's your take on either hips falling through towards your target, or people thinking they have to come at a hard angle and whip their hips into the ball? What's your take on that stuff?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that like I feel like in punting, I feel like there's these fundamentals that are more like non-negotiable versus kicking. I think that some guys have a lot of rotation and then some guys have a lot of momentum through. And it's kind of similar to a golf swing. And I don't know how into the weeds you've ever been like examining golf swings. I went like on a very, very deep dive when I was trying to get better post, it was like after I got cut by the Falcons after the preseason, living at home. Every specialist like who's like gone through the NFL process is like, you're living at home. There's nothing to do. You're kicking some. You're like going to the driving. So I got really into the kind of golf swing. And so it's this kind of idea of like some guys drop the club inside and use a big circle. And a lot of times those guys are like pretty dang successful. There's plenty of professional guys, like these long guys who kind of like, big rotation, big circle. But then there's guys who kind of try to feel like they're more finishing with the club head kind of straight through the target. Like their hips aren't really on this big pendulum. They're just kind of stable and it's a little bit more compact. And so I think that with kicking, I think that, you look at a guy like Younghoe Koo, and for Koo, if you ever watched him from behind, his angle is like crazy tight. Like, I mean, it's like if I tried to do it as someone who's like 6'2", I would feel so jammed, but he just body through, right? I mean, like flowing through towards his target, whatever. But then you look at like Justin Tucker, who's like steps back, like wide step. And he's got that like whippy, just, around a little bit more.
Like
and so I think that, and it's kind of like if you have a long leg kicker, well, then the rotation kind of works because you're able to use those long levers. If you're a shorter kicker, you're not going to gain as much off the rotation. So you're going to have a little bit more of the drive through. So that's why I'm kind of interested in going back and seeing like the David Akers one to kind of see where he's at, like in terms of talking technique, because, I think that I could be wrong about his height, but I don't think he's a very tall fellow. Yeah. So I think that, right. And so I think that it's just kind of like kicking is kind of about like the body type matters. That's what I'm saying. Punting is like, it's alignment, it's steps, it's pulling. Kicking is a little bit more forgiving in terms of a lot of different like distinct styles. But it's figuring out why different misses happened according to your form and some of the different, some of the different reasons why you're struggling the way you're struggling. I'm not getting height. If you're a shorter kicker, well, this one's kind of like for both. So, I mean, it's like hopping into the ball is kind of a death sentence for kicking and punting. But I think, again, kicking is more forgiving for just the angle of how you kind of come into it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I will say, just knowing Dave and talking to Dave, his big thing is that heel to toe plant on field goal, and then making sure your momentum, your fall through is directly at your target. Now that
Sure.
momentum might bring you off your line a little bit, but as long as the hips are facing forward, and that made sense to me being a shorter kicker. Whereas, as you said, a taller kicker, maybe a Harrison Bucker is going to get more getting that freaking whip. I mean, talk a little bit about, you train with these guys at the next level, and being, a little bit older than them, relatively their age. How do you coach a guy that's played at that NFL level, and what are some mental, either, preparation or drills, or how do they handle distractions?
Yeah, so I think first of all, like how I coach NFL guys is obviously different than how I coach high school guys. Um, because NFL guys have been doing it for a long time, especially if a guy now, if it's someone who I've worked with for a while, like I worked with AJ since he was a sophomore, I'll just be like super blunt with him, and we just have some great moments of like just coaching, I guess, exchanges. But if it's someone who I'm working with who uh is kind of seeing me and we don't necessarily have like a relationship outside of that, then I try to really listen and to kind of like understand how they understand their form. And so that way I can kind of be, yes, coaching them, but also in some ways like a caddy where it's like it's kind of just about, I think I mentioned this a while ago, but it's like it's avoiding their miss hits. Like they're in the NFL because they can nuke a football. And it's about hearing their frustrations and hearing them say, I can't figure this out. And it's like, okay, well, let's just start there. Like, here's kind of my understanding. Here's, I watch you hit a couple balls. Here's where I'm at with this. And I try to just like kind of get them to understand why the problem is that they're having. And so I think it's a lot more of like a feedback, like a two-way street. Versus it wouldn't be like that for high school. There's just not enough of a working knowledge of the form. So that kind of, I think, answers the first part related to how I coach them differently. But I think, and when it comes to mentally, um, I think we we talked earlier about kind of like trusting the process and about having as little in their head as they can, but at the same time, you need particular cues that are going to get you into the good positions that you're trying to achieve. So, a lot of times it'll be like kind of texting back and forth with some of these guys, kind of like asking about, well, what are you thinking about? What are your cues? Could you consider, you know, as you step into it, flat foot, right? Could you consider, um, you know, as you catch it, could you consider heels, right? Where you feel like your weight's back. And so I think that it's kind of working with them in that capacity to where you don't want anyone out there with a cluttered mind about their technique. I think that every single NFL guy would say if there's a shred of doubt about their technique as they're punting under the live situations, that is by far the worst situation that they could be in because it's just going to spiral. Even if you do hit a good ball, you're not necessarily sure why, and you're basically just punting or like kicking out of fear that you don't mess up. Versus your mind's clear, you have your cue, you take a breath, and then you just go. And if it doesn't work out, then you come back to your cue instead of your entire form. And I think that it's simplifying that is so important because the stakes are so high and because punting or kicking is so complex. So many things going on, so many variables.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Real quick, what are some of your favorite, punt cues that you've used with your guys over the years, or, what are some common things that you like to use?
Yeah, well, I think, it could be, I mentioned like flat foot for guys who normally go like really far forward and toe up. Because if you think like don't get too far forward, well, you're gonna get too far forward, or at least you're gonna kind of be just kind of skittish about it. So flat foot, heels, like I mentioned, some things like it could be like a quick step, right? Like it could be just quick where it's like I catch the ball, I'm just trying to get that first step really fast to the ground. But I think the main thing is like for all of these cues, they happen at the beginning. I really don't want anyone to be thinking about something their drop is doing at the end because it's too long of a time. Like the train's already left the station. It's too big of a process. It's already happened. So everything that I think should be cued is just in that first, like how you catch the ball, how you take your step, and then you just shut your brain off. And again, you rely on the drill work to get you to that consistency of where the ball, ends up going.
Interesting. So you like to stay away from like any contact cues or anything?
Yeah. I think that like you can't. I just am of the opinion that you can't control that as well as you're going to mess up that often. And so then that cue becomes a matter of like success or failure. And then you get in your own head about it. Because if you're something about ball contact, okay, I'm going to point my toe. So much is happening right there. Like after that fact, I don't think you can notice it. I think it's happening too fast. And so if you're unsure about whether it happened, then you go into this kind of like mystery mode where you're kind of like, you're on the sidelines. Maybe it was a good punt, maybe it wasn't. And you're just kind of thinking about playing it frantically back in your head versus everyone can remember how they caught the ball, or at least that cue of how they're starting. That's not going to differ ball to ball. It's just like you train enough, you integrate that cue into your practice stuff. And so those are the cues that usually work. You kind of see benefit.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that actually. That's yeah, don't stress out over the late stuff and try to control controllables almost.
Yeah.
All right, Dawson, boy, this has been great, man. I appreciate you coming on. You have a very different perspective on specialists, and I love hearing that. I think it helps progress, a lot of different old thinking too. So I appreciate that about you. We got one final section here called the rapid fire section. You ready for this?
All right, cool, man.
I'm gonna give you a quick question, and you can give me a word or a few words, and you can describe it if you like, but we'll kind of try to go at a rapid fire pace. Sound good?
Yeah. Hit me. Okay. Hit me. Ready for it.
You talked a little bit earlier about the biggest adjustment from college or high school to college. What's the biggest adjustment college to NFL for specialists?
Avoid miss hits down the middle.
Ooh, like that. Okay. You talked a little bit about field goals. Okay. And having cues. I love having cues. What's one cue that you use a lot with field goals and why?
Falling into your jab.
Mm-hmm.
I think feeling like if you have a string behind you and someone just cuts it, that causes your jab. So you're not worried about the distance of the jab. You're worried about how you move into it. Again, I just feel like you should never worry. You can't control where your foot steps. It's the cause of the weight momentum behind it.
And it's the balance of the weight too.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Guys get worn out at the end of the season, kicking legs, kickoff, punt. How do you fight that, or how do you tell your guys to stave that off? How do they stay strong throughout the season?
Limit the reps through lots of drill work, lots of one steps, lots of line drives. They'll kick as many balls, but their legs will still be fresh. It's not full reps.
Break it down. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then this is a new section presented by the Kicker's Bible. Okay. You ready for this?
Sweet.
It's called the Mythbuster section. I want to dispel myths about specialists, special teams, coaching in general. Okay. What is a technique that is commonly taught? And this wasn't told to Dawson before, right? So put him on the spot. A technique that's commonly taught, whether it's punt, field goal, whatever, that you don't agree with, or you think you could be phrased a better way.
I think definitely you shouldn't keep your head down while you're punting. I think that's a little bit more common now. I would go as far as to say I think keeping your head down and kicking is overrated. I think a lot of guys get so into I didn't keep my head down. I feel like the ball's already gone. It's already out there. I don't think that you should have to try and force yourself to stay down.
Which attributes to crunching, right, and the bad body position, like you're talking about.
I think the payoff isn't worth the emphasis of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you made it, Dawson. You hit the rapid fire round. You went through the Mythbusters. I appreciate you coming out strong, man. And that was an awesome episode. Do you have anything that you'd like to plug? I know you have a few talks or anything coming up.
Yeah, I've been working hard on a video series, on a entire kind of like a video curriculum that it's in the process of being made. Videos are recorded, we're ready to go. My partner in crime, AJ Cole, is gonna be heavily featured. So hopefully in about a month. That's what I'm trying to aim for. But we'll have some great video content for some people, coaches, players, etc. Hopefully soon in the pipeline.
That's really cool, man. And I can speak for the rest of Twitter and whatever world out there, the kicking world, that we love when you post some videos like that. So fire it up. Where can we find that? Where will that be published when it does get put out there?
Yeah, that's just going to be through oneononekicking.com. It's going to be kind of like a simple kind of program. We talked a lot about schedule, routine. And so trying to kind of give coaches, players, just like a really strong starting point for like, oh, here's what I can give my punters, my kickers. Here's what I can do as a punter to develop that consistency through drill work.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, that's really cool. I know wherever that gets posted, just, throw that up there. And
yeah. I'll be posting it. I'll be posting all about it.
Yeah. We'll buy it or whatever, make the purchase. So cool. Any final words for the pod?
Hey, I just appreciate being able to be here. I think it's so cool what you're doing, especially just kind of shining a light into, whether it be technique, whether it be guys who've done it for a long time, mental stuff. I just think I hope that there's plenty of people who are listening, and especially specialists who, I just think there's so much insight that can be gained. I wish I would have been all about this podcast if I'd been in college. You're just like searching for information of like how to do this better, searching for answers. So yeah, man, I'm gonna be a listener from now on, and I think I got some seasons to catch up on too. So
you got a few. Well, I appreciate these kind words there, Dawson. I really do. We are just trying to help the younger generation, and give them some direction. You've done a great job of that today. So
I appreciate it.
Without further ado, that's been Dawson Zimmerman with One-on-One Kicking on the Iceman Podcast. Thanks for listening, and make sure you give us a follow or a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Music if you're so inclined to do so. For any questions or suggestions on further guests, follow us at Iceman Coaching on Twitter or on Instagram, and check out our website, icemankicking.com, for updates and new talks and podcasts. Check out our TikTok for the best clips of the newest episodes. Tune in next week for another awesome guest. I'm Brett Arkellian, and for everyone at the Iceman Podcast, so long and stay cool under pressure.
Roll another one 'cause I'm winning in my photo.